You're watching live coverage of the NASA SpaceX Crew 4 mission as they return back to planet Earth. Dragon Freedom departed the International Space Station at 9:05 a.m. Pacific time this morning with NASA astronauts Kjell Lindgren, Bob Hines, Jessica Watkins, and Samantha Cristoforetti. Currently, they're on their way to the targeted splashdown site off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. My name is Jesse Anderson. I'm a production engineering manager here at SpaceX, and joining me today from NASA Communications is Sandra Jones.
Thanks so much for having me, Jesse. It's great to be here. So upon departing Space Station, Dragon underwent a sequence of departure burns. And since then, the crew has had a bit of a rest period and has since now kicked off preparations for re-entry. And this next phase of the mission is when things really start to get exciting, and Dragon has a series of steps to complete before returning Crew 4 home.
First, Dragon will maneuver the correct attitude and jettison its trunk, which is the cylindrical unpressurized part of the spacecraft. The trunk is currently connected to the aft or the bottom section of the Dragon capsule, where the heat shield is located. So in order to expose the heat shield and get the vehicle ready for atmospheric re-entry, we'll jettison the trunk.
And from there, the spacecraft will use its forward thrusters to perform a deorbit burn, which will put Dragon on a trajectory to return to Earth. This burn will last just under 17 minutes once it starts. And the deorbit burn uses Draco thrusters on Dragon, primarily the 4 located on the forward bulkhead, and is executed at the apogee, or the very highest point of Dragon's current orbit around Earth. This will alter Dragon's path to ultimately line it up to re-enter Earth's atmosphere and splash down off the coast of Florida.
Now, before we go any further, let's take a minute to meet our crew.
Dr. Kjell Lindgren was born in Taipei, Taiwan, but spent most of his childhood overseas in England. He is married with 3 children, and Dr. Lindgren was an instructor and jump master with the U.S. Air Force Academy. He also has a doctorate in medicine and served as a NASA flight surgeon and then as an astronaut aboard Soyuz, where he spent 141 days in space during expeditions 44 and 45. And he is the commander of Dragon Freedom.
Bob Hines was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He's married with 3 daughters, and he has a Master of Science degree in aerospace engineering and served 21 years in the U.S. Air Force as a test pilot and fighter pilot in the F-15E. He came to NASA as a research pilot, and he's the Crew 4 pilot for the Dragon Freedom on what was his first spaceflight.
And Jessica Watkins considers Lafayette, Colorado her hometown. Her college rugby team won the national championship in 2008. She's a geologist who completed several internships with NASA, including one testing system designs for the Mars Perseverance rover. She became an astronaut in 2017, and she is a mission specialist on Dragon Freedom, also wrapping up her first mission to space.
And the second mission specialist is Samantha Cristoforetti. She was born in Milan, Italy, and has 2 children. She's a fighter pilot, and in 2013, Cristoforetti launched into space aboard a Soyuz for a long-duration spaceflight to the International Space Station. Several years later, she was awarded the Knight Grand Cross of the Order
Freedom. SpaceX, deorbit sequence start in 5 minutes.
Freedom copies.
And great news there. The deorbit burn will begin in about 5 minutes from now. Several years later, she was awarded the Knight Grand Cross of the Order of Merit from the President of Italy. This was Cristoforetti's second long-duration stay on the International Space Station. Now, to prepare for these upcoming events, right now the Dragon spacecraft is doing a couple of things autonomously. It's isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon temperate for Kjell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha during re-entry. Now, Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism, which will terminate data, power, and fluid connections between the capsule and the trunk.
And we are just a few minutes away from the beginning of the claw separation procedure. But I did just want to mention a fun fact about Samantha Cristoforetti, since you had just discussed her background. So this was her second space flight, and she now has a cumulative 369 days in space, which is second only to the record holder, Peggy Whitson, for longest space flight by a woman. So Samantha is now second in the running, so pretty special for her.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. That's a lot of time out in space, so that's pretty cool.
Over a year, yeah, 369 days. Quite a chunk of change for sure. So next up, we are looking ahead towards the claw separation, as you mentioned, and then following that, we will have the trunk that separates after that. We did hear a call out that we're just about 5 minutes away from that process beginning, so we will stand by and look towards that here shortly. And here we are getting a really great view of the recovery boat that is staged off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. Today's recovery vessel is named Megan after Crew 2 astronaut Megan McArthur. The teams are ready and looking forward to supporting splashdown here in just about an hour from now. We are targeting 1:55 p.m. Pacific time for splashdown today. And so once we see Dragon splash down later today, we will have some fast boats that go out and work on cutting the parachutes, and then the capsule will actually be brought onto the ship. In that view you saw there was a net, and that's called the nest, and that's where the Dragon vehicle is brought into, and then that part will be rotated and the crew will be able to egress the capsule, and then we'll see them for the first time on Earth in about 6 months.
Yeah, and there is definitely a process for getting each one of the astronauts out of Dragon. You know, they have been out in space for about 6 months, so we will have a medical team there checking in on the team and each one of the individuals as they step out of the Dragon vehicle.
So we're now coming up on just about 4 minutes or so until we hear the call out for claw separation. And you are getting a view here from inside Mission Control Houston on the left hand of your screen, as well as Mission Control here in Hawthorne, California on the right hand of your screen. And it's a little difficult to tell from this view, but if you're looking at the flight director's console, which is on the left hand of the screen, about the third row up, you might be able to spot a couple vases of roses. And this is a very special tradition that has been ongoing for over 30 years in Mission Control Houston. We have a very special family in Texas that sends flowers during missions and during returns, and it's something that the team in Mission Control Houston always says that they look forward to. They know it's go time when they see the roses on the console in the room.
That is so awesome. Just a nice little pleasant set of flowers for all the people that are hardworking. You know, it's not just the crew on board the International Space Station. There are so many teams involved with, you know, these crew flights. So that's really cool to see, and nice touch for everybody there in Mission Control.
Exactly right.
Freedom, SpaceX, deorbit sequence start.
We see it.
And there we did hear the call out that the deorbit sequence start is underway. So next up, we'll be looking towards trunk separation here shortly. We should hear that call out here soon. Right now, the claw is where the umbilicals for power and telemetry from the trunk and its solar arrays are connected to the capsule. So we'll be looking for those to be disconnected, and then Dragon will be running exclusively on its battery power. And then after that, we'll see the trunk jettison, and that trunk jettison will harmlessly burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. It's not necessary for re-entry, so at that point, it will be just the small capsule, kind of like the one you see right behind us here. It'll look very similar to that as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah, and actually jettisoning the trunk will expose the heat shield that's required for re-entry as Dragon reorients itself for splashdown.
So we are standing by for confirmation of trunk separation, but so far everything has gone very smoothly today. The weather is looking good in the splashdown zone, and we're excited to see the crew on the ground. I'm sure they're excited to be back home after their mission in space. And then here's another view from the Megan recovery vessel that is staged off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. We did hear that the helicopters are already there and have landed successfully. Those will bring the crew back to land after they do splash down and get taken out of the water and onto the recovery vessel. And so the crew will return to Houston, Texas, and they'll land at Ellington Field, just a few minutes away from the Johnson Space Center. And then Samantha Cristoforetti will return to Europe, as she is a European Space Agency astronaut. So standing by for confirmation of trunk separation. And this process, like much with Dragon, is all done autonomously.
Freedom, SpaceX, we see nominal trunk jettison.
So great news there. The trunk has been jettisoned, and it looks like everything performed as expected during that trunk separation. So with the telemetry, looking good, the nitrox system is now primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield is now exposed and ready for that atmospheric re-entry.
SpaceX Freedom, didn't copy your trunk separation.
Copy, Freedom, we had a handover there, but just to confirm, we did see a nominal trunk jettison.
Freedom copies.
Some good comms between the crew and the core here in Mission Control. Now up next, we have the final steps that Dragon will perform prior to re-entry, the slew or maneuver to deorbit burn attitude and the deorbit burn itself. Now, this is the last time that the forward Dracos, which are the four thrusters located on top of the vehicle, will ignite. The deorbit burn will place Dragon on a precise trajectory to return to the splashdown zone off the coast of Florida and will last about 17 minutes once it starts.
And once this deorbit burn does take place, we are really committed. There's not really a turning back point after this burn. As you mentioned, this is a bit of a longer burn. It's going to last just under 17 minutes here, but we are expecting that burn to begin here shortly. We are now in the burn attitude, as you mentioned. The Dragon slewed or positioned itself to get into that burn attitude. So here in just a couple of minutes, about 2 minutes, we expect to hear that the deorbit burn has begun, and that will last about 17 minutes once it starts. And once this deorbit burn is complete, the next milestone that we can look ahead towards is the nose cone closing. The nose cone has been opened since the crew docked to the International Space Station on April 27th, but it will close up for the re-entry process as it protects a lot of the vital equipment that is necessary. So that nose cone will close after this deorbit burn. But it needs to be open right now so that the thrusters are exposed to be able to have the burn occur. Coming up on 1 minute until the deorbit burn begins.
And some great live views of the Crew-4 crew inside of the Dragon capsule.
And we are standing by for that deorbit burn to begin.
That should be happening any moment now. So far, we've had the trunk jettisoned, the slew to deorbit burn attitude, and again, just waiting for that deorbit burn to start.
Hearing 10 seconds until the burn begins. And we do have confirmation that the deorbit burn has begun. This burn is expected to last about 17 minutes. So within the last 10 minutes, Dragon jettisoned its trunk and initiated the deorbit burn just seconds ago. That deorbit burn is now underway. We are expecting about 16 more minutes to remain in that deorbit burn. The burn in all is slated to last about 17 minutes. And for these operations, NASA and SpaceX do closely coordinate with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safety zone to ensure public safety, and of course for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew on board the returning spacecraft. Multiple notices are issued to the mariners in advance and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard patrol boats are deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones. We do want to stress to the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases risk to the astronauts in the capsule. And the teams are working to recover them from the water and the safety of those that come too close. So for the safety of the crew and your safety, we really do recommend you sit back and watch here as we'll be bringing you the very best possible views of our astronauts' homecoming. And you can see some of those views right now from the recovery vessel, Megan.
Like we mentioned earlier, the deorbit burn is the last time that the 4 forward Draco thrusters will fire. Dragon Freedom has not yet entered Earth's atmosphere. This deorbit burn is what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. Right now, Chell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha are using their screens to keep tabs on the burn duration, which we were able to get a live view of a little bit earlier. Draco thruster firings and trajectory details like entry angle, capsule perigee, and how much distance remaining until the deorbit burn termination. Dragon is flying itself. Again, it's autonomous, so all the crew has to do is stay strapped in their seats and keep tabs on things. With Chell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha ready to deorbit and splash down back on Earth, they'll be heading to one of 7 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading the supported sites across multiple locations helps to maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad weather.
And earlier today, NASA and SpaceX jointly selected prime and alternate splashdown locations off the coast of Jacksonville, which is our prime today and where the boat is currently staged, and the alternate is Tallahassee, Florida. The selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedule for the returning crew members.
We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for re-entry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39 hours. Getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure that the crew, if properly rested, is properly rested for dynamic operations, preventing us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them. Trajectory and ballistics experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up Dragon with 7 landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities.
Dragon uses its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude-lowering maneuvers and to line up with the selected primary site. It can also change to different alternate sites while in free flight if sudden weather moves in that we'll need to avoid. And weather is something that we're constantly looking at, making the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks. So for the Crew 4 return, we looked at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside the capsule and the recovery teams on the water. We're also looking for wind speeds less than 15 feet per second or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly Chell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha back to Florida. Once Dragon began flying free, we had a number of additional checkpoints to either proceed towards the primary site, head to the alternate, or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we're in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which is the last burn in the trip home and commits the Dragon capsule to re-entering the atmosphere. And as we've mentioned, this burn is underway. We are hearing good calls that the burn is proceeding nominally or as expected, which is great news.
If you're just now joining, the deorbit burn started just about 6 minutes ago. It's about a 17-minute or just under 17-minute burn. And we are just waiting to hear the call out for when it's complete for a normal burn. And that's what will give us that confirmation for Dragon Freedom.
So we are 6 minutes into that burn, as you said. It's about a 17-minute long burn, so we're continuing to progress in that burn, continuing to get good call-outs that everything is going as expected. And so during this deorbit burn, this is the last time that those 4 forward Draco thrusters will fire during this mission. So Freedom has not yet entered the Earth's atmosphere yet. This deorbit burn is really what will line the vehicle up and put it on its final trajectory to the landing site, which of course is off the coast of Jacksonville. So the crew continues to really head home after spending 170 days in space. During that time, they completed 2,720 orbits of the Earth, and they traveled over 72 million miles. It's really interesting to think about it in that perspective because the space station is moving 17,500 miles per hour, which means that they orbit the Earth every 90 minutes, and the crew sees a sunset and a sunrise every 45 minutes. So when you're there for 170 days, you see a lot of sunsets, a lot of sunrises, and you travel a lot of miles, over 72 million of them, in fact.
Yeah, that's a lot of miles, and that sounds pretty cool to see all those sunsets and sunrises. Development of Dragon 4 Crew started with Cargo Dragon. Dragon was designed from the beginning for flying humans to space, so much so that even the first Cargo Dragon had a window on it. Now, before we could fly humans, our teams implemented a number of design upgrades to make sure that both Dragon and Falcon 9 are suitable for flying people, and then put both vehicles through thousands of tests to prove their safety. Now, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit and beyond. It is the only spacecraft currently flying that is capable of returning significant amounts of cargo to Earth, and is the first private spacecraft to take humans to the International Space Station. Dragon is fully autonomous, which means that it can basically fly itself, but also features full manual override capabilities in case of emergency. Now, standing at almost 27 feet tall from the bottom of the trunk to the top of the nose cone, Dragon is composed of 2 main elements. That's the capsule, which is designed to hold crew and pressurized cargo, and an unpressurized section known as the trunk. And for today, we have already jettisoned the trunk, which reveals the heat shield on Dragon as it prepares to return back home to Earth. And there you can see the 27-foot tall Dragon vehicle. That top part there is called the capsule, and below it with the black and white colors there is the trunk. The black portion of that are solar arrays.
And you do also see that nose cone at the very top there. Following this deorbit burn, we will close up that nose cone as we discussed, but the nose cone does open for docking and remains attached to the Crew Dragon spacecraft. And then it will close here following the deorbit burn. We are over halfway complete with the deorbit burn. We have about 7 minutes remaining, continuing to hear good callouts, everything proceeding as expected in this deorbit burn.
If you're just now joining us, the deorbit burn started around 1:01 p.m. Pacific time. It will last about 17 minutes or just under 17 minutes, and we are just waiting to hear the call out for a normal burn, and that will confirm the completion of the deorbit burn for Dragon Freedom.
And prior to this deorbit burn, there was a series of other burns that took place. One of those occurred just a short time ago, and that was the propellant wasting burn, or prop wasting burn, and that really is to just get rid of the excess propellant that is not needed for re-entry, and it helps the capsule to weigh less ahead of the re-entry sequence.
Then coming up after the deorbit burn, about 12 to 13 minutes later, we will begin to close the nose cone. Speaking of, Dragon's previous design, we used to jettison the nose cone, but for reusability purposes, we now keep the nose cone attached. So once we finish the final burn, which is the deorbit burn, we no longer need to use those thrusters, those forward bulkhead thrusters, so we can close the nose cone as it makes its way back down to Earth.
And following the completion of the deorbit burn and the nose cone closing, the crew will then begin to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. There will be a blackout period where we will not be able to communicate back and forth with them. That does last just a few minutes, and that is completely expected. That is happening because the plasma is building up around the vehicle, but the heat shield will do its job and protect the crew throughout that process. And then once the crew has gotten to the other side of the atmosphere, we should have communications back with them, and then we will see the drogue parachutes deploy, then the main parachutes, and then we'll see splashdown just a short time after that. Really, that's just about 40 minutes away from now. We should see the crew splashing down in the ocean. So I'm excited for it. I'm sure the crew's excited for it. But we are nearing the end of this deorbit burn, about 5 minutes remaining in it. So to talk a little bit about those parachutes that are going to deploy, the drogue parachutes slow the Dragon down from 350 miles per hour. So that's still going pretty quick. But then once the main parachutes deploy, it will slow down quite a bit more to less than 20 miles per hour. Just about 4 minutes remaining in the deorbit burn. So after those parachutes are deployed, we will see them be cut. There's a fast boat that goes out there, and that's really the purpose of the of that particular fast boat, is to cut those parachutes. And that's really just to make sure that they don't get caught in the wind or is pulling the crew around. So those parachutes will be cut. That's expected. And then after that, a sniff check will be done by one of the recovery folks, and that's just to ensure that there is no vapors or anything that would pose a risk to the recovery personnel or the crew themselves as they egress the capsule.
We are just a couple minutes away from the completion of the deorbit burn. We are just waiting for a call out to confirm that.
We have 2 minutes left in this deorbit burn. And next up after the deorbit burn will be the nose cone closing. It's very important to close that nose cone because it protects the docking mechanism and some guidance and navigation and control equipment. And so at this point, the heat shield is now pointed towards the Earth and is really getting ready to do the heavy lifting of protecting the capsule. And of course, more importantly, the crew inside from the over 3,500 degree Fahrenheit that's going to be exposed to as the Dragon capsule enters the Earth as part of their recovery operations. So that will be coming up here shortly. We have just about a minute remaining in today's deorbit burn. Continuing to hear good call-outs that the deorbit burn is going as expected. Dragon systems are looking good, and of course the crew is monitoring every step of the way, checking in. They do have iPads as well as the screens that they are able to utilize and look on the tablet as to how much time is remaining on the deorbit burn. And we did just hear the deorbit burn is complete and nominal.
Freedom, SpaceX, deorbit burn complete, performance nominal, nose cone closure is initiated.
Freedom copies, nominal deorbit burn, glad to hear it, and nose cone closure initiated.
Awesome news, nominal deorbit burn, and also heard the call out that the nose cone procedure is going to begin.
So in the background, Dragon is currently inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete the deorbit burn, ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone shut for re-entry. Also, the vehicle has initiated the nitrox suit purge. This will help keep Kel, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha cool and comfortable during re-entry. And you do see that nose cone beginning to close here on your screen. At this point, that nose cone is closing and protecting the forward hatch for re-entry. Chell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha are using their screens, as we mentioned, to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by a set of hooks.
Again, this nose cone sequence is about 12 to 13 minutes long, so we've got about 11 minutes left for that nose cone to officially complete its closure. And good callouts.
So now we're really just in a waiting period right now before we begin that re-entry period. That's coming up in just a few minutes when the crew themselves will re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. And as we discussed earlier, the heat shield will really be protecting the crew during this time period. The temperatures can reach 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit, but the heat shield was created to protect the crew during this dynamic operation. And as they enter through the atmosphere, it's really going to slow them down. Right now, they're going a little more than 17,000 miles per hour, but as they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, once they come out on the other side, they'll be going much slower, and then the parachutes will just continue to slow them down from 350 miles per hour to a little less than 20 at the time that they splash down.
And also during re-entry, there will be a period where, that heat builds up around the capsule. There'll be plasma that builds up around the capsule. So there will be a blackout zone, which is normal, lasts about 6 minutes long. And then once we get through that blackout zone, then we'll confirm confirmation with the crew to make sure that they still can communicate with the ground here in mission control.
And so we continue to progress through the nose cone closure process. At this time, the hooks are closing. There are 2 sets of 6 hooks, so 12 hooks total that need to close to secure the nose cone and protect that critical equipment. So we are getting a view on the left hand of your screen of Mission Control in Houston, Texas. That is where our flight controllers and the flight director monitor the International Space Station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have a variety of different console positions that specialize in different parts of the International Space Station, and they all work together as a team to keep the space station flying. It's now been flying for over 20. It's been continuously occupied now for over 20 years. And on board the International Space Station right now are 7 human beings, of course, Crew 5 that just arrived last week, as well as 2 Russian cosmonauts and NASA astronaut Frank Rubio, who arrived on a Soyuz vehicle. But with Crew 4 departing earlier today, it brought the population from 11 crew members down to 7, and that will be the complement for the next few months.
And we've been keeping the International Space Station pretty busy with NASA crew flights being about every 6 months. So it's been pretty cool to see, a different group of astronauts every 6 months being able to, perform research and science on the International Space Station.
And that's a really great point. The International Space Station truly is an orbiting laboratory. Crew 4 contributed to hundreds of science experiments while they were on board the International Space Station. Crew 5 will continue some of those science investigations as well as start new ones. And what I love so much about it is many of those science investigations have direct implications to us here on Earth. If you are interested in learning more about that, you can check out the Benefits for Humanity. The 2020 version was just published here recently, and you can find that on nasa.gov. So if you are just tuning in with us, Crew 5 has undocked from the International Space Station, and the deorbit burn has taken place. That was all successful. And
Freedom, SpaceX, nose cone secured for entry.
Freedom copies.
We got some great news. The nose cone sequence is complete, meaning that the nose cone is now officially closed. As we begin the second half of entry, Dragon is now beginning to inject cooled nitrox into the air being delivered to the suits worn by Chell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha. Now again, this is what will allow the crew to remain comfortable while external temperatures reach 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Now the heat shield is pointing forward, leading the capsule to the landing site. And speaking of the heat shield, Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of Pika 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. First generation Pika was first developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system.
And SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop Pika X, which was the second generation product used on all Dragon 1 CRS missions that successfully resupplied the space station on 20 missions. Then Pika 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down costs and mass.
Now, the remainder of the Dragon capsule is comprised primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus Pika and protects the underlying composite material or structure during re-entry to ensure the structural capabilities are maintained.
And while Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit during peak re-entry conditions, the characteristics of the TPS, or thermal protection systems, coupled with the ECLSS, environmental cooling and life support system, in the pressurized interior will help ensure that Chell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha stay cool and comfortable during all phases of re-entry through splashdown.
After Crew Dragon Freedom has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy, and that'll slow the crew's descent. Now, first will be the 2 drogue chutes, followed by the 4 main chutes to guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching in April earlier this year. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the capsule detect that they are at the right speed and altitude.
Vehicle velocity at drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour, as we mentioned earlier, and those drogue parachutes do deploy at about 18,000 feet above the water. Now, vehicle velocity at main deploy is approximately 119 miles per hour and deploy at about 6,500 feet. Vehicle velocity at water splashdown is approximately 16 miles per hour, and the highest G load the crew will experience during re-entry is approximately 3 to 5 Gs. So next up, we are looking ahead towards the comms blackout that we discussed as the crew re-enters the atmosphere. This is expected and can last a few minutes long, but once the crew is on the other side of the comms blackout and we do regain communications with them, the drogue chutes will deploy. We are tracking the first set of the first set of parachutes, the drogue chutes, to deploy around 1:51 p.m. Just a minute later, the main chutes will deploy, and then about 3 minutes after that, the moment we've all been waiting for, we'll see crew for splashdown off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. We are still tracking approximately 1:55 p.m. Pacific time today for that splashdown. And so at this time, all of the recovery teams are in place. Those fast boats that we were talking about earlier have deployed, and we really are getting ready to bring this crew home. Everything has proceeded as expected with the deorbit burn. The nose cone is now deployed, and the next big milestone that we're looking towards is that communications blackout.
Again, we have an awesome live view inside of the Dragon capsule, seeing our crew. And again, we've mentioned this, that they use the displays to monitor the activities that are happening with Dragon. But Dragon is flying autonomously, so they really just get to sit back and just monitor.
So we did mention that we are looking towards entering a period where we will have a communications blackout with the crew. That is because of the plasma that's building up, because we're using the atmosphere itself to help slow us down. We're going about 17,000 miles an hour, and we do need to slow the crew down before they re-enter the Earth, before they splash down. And as they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, that will definitely happen. They'll be going about 350 miles per hour once they enter the other side of the atmosphere. And as we said, they'll be going less than 20 miles per hour at the time of splashdown.
Freedom, SpaceX for entry briefing.
And Freedom, stand by.
VHL, I have no deltas from the previously briefed tablet timeline. Dragon systems are looking healthy and ready for entry, and we have no updates for splashdown. The recovery team is ready to support, and weather's looking good. How copy?
We copy all, Arthur. We're looking forward to splashdown and seeing the recovery forces.
There chatting with the core here in Mission Control Hawthorne. That's what you're seeing there on your screen. We did get to see a live view of the crew in their seats in the Dragon capsule as they're making their way back home. The suit's primary function is to protect the crew in the event of a cabin depressurization. And if that were to occur, the suit would inflate to provide a habitable environment long enough for the crew to return home. And there you can see them there. Right now, they are also filling their suits with some cool nitrox that actually helps keep them cool. The suits are kind of an extension of the Dragon capsule. It's almost like they have their own personal AC unit on them. And the suits are flame-resistant materials on the outer layer. Also protects the crew in the event of a fire. They are custom-tailored single-piece suits. This means that the helmet, gloves, and boots all remain attached together. And the helmet that we were able to see on the screen that they're wearing is 3D printed nylon and does have a visor that pivots open. And then they do have quick disconnects or QDs on the right thigh, which mates to an umbilical on the seats, and that is what provides the air for ventilation, oxygen, nitrox for pressurization, and allows the electronics to be connected all from a single location on the suit. And again, if you're just now joining us, we are live watching Crew 4 return home to planet Earth from the International Space Station. We've had the deorbit burn, we've jettisoned the trunk for the vehicle, and the nose cone has closed on Dragon Freedom. And again, another live view inside of the capsule there.
And SpaceX from Freedom. Tablets are secure, restraints are tightened, and our visors are down. We are ready for entry.
SpaceX copies for tablets, restraints, and visors. Please confirm that tablets are stowed with the loops as provided on the satchels.
Copy, welcome.
So we are now less than 20 minutes away from splashdown, and again we are going to be entering that blackout communication period. But once we are on the other side of that, things will happen pretty quickly. The drogue chutes will deploy.
And SpaceX Freedom tablets are all secure.
SpaceX copies. Thank you, Freedom. And at this time, we're just over 5 minutes from predicted comm blackout. We will see you on the other side at 2049.
Okay, cop from LOS, and we'll see you on the flip side at 2049.
And so you did hear those words from the ground up to Crew 4, namely Kjell Lindgren, just ensuring that the tablets are stowed and secured in the proper positioning ahead of the communications blackout expected now less than 5 minutes from now, and really in anticipation of re-entry and then splashdown. As we were saying, the pace is really going to pick up once we are through that communications blackout. The drogue parachutes will deploy, and then the main parachutes will deploy, and then we will see the crew splash down. After that, we'll see the fast boats head out to the crew, inspect it, make sure everything is looking good and the integrity of the vehicle is as it should be, and those main parachutes will also be cut, and then the recovery personnel will work on securing the vehicle and bringing it into the recovery vessel. And then after some private medical checks with the crew, we should see the crew egress a short time after that. So again, we are expecting the splashdown to occur at 1:55 Pacific time, so just a few minutes from now, and we are coming up on that communications blackout that is as expected as well.
Yeah, and this blackout period is basically when the vehicle is entering back into the Earth's atmosphere. It is heating up and plasma is building around the capsule, which prevents communications with here in Mission Control. It lasts about 6 minutes. It is nominal. And once we get through that blackout period, we do make sure that the crew can communicate with the ground here in Mission Control.
And we do have the NASA plane, the WB-57, which is up in the air, and it's equipped with some imaging technology that will be able to get pretty much the first views of the Dragon capsule on its return back to Earth. So we are getting some of that footage right now. We are anticipating that communications blackout and loss of signal here shortly. This is really the beginning of that period where the crew themselves will be re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. And at this time, the Dragon is working through a slewing maneuver, which means that the Dragon is helping to orient itself in the proper orientation ahead of the re-entry of the Earth's atmosphere. Again, we're just a couple of minutes away from that anticipated blackout period.
We are just about a minute away from that communications blackout period. Again, it should last only about 6 minutes long. And this is what happens when the vehicle begins to heat up as it's entering back into the Earth's atmosphere and builds up a layer of plasma around the vehicle. Again, this is nominal, and we will establish communications once the vehicle is through that period.
So we are hearing that the Dragon is beginning to hit the Earth's atmosphere here, really at the upper limits of the atmosphere. So that's going to help to slow the vehicle down quite a bit, but we are now seconds away from the anticipated loss of signal. Standing by for confirmation that we are in the communications blackout. And as we await that confirmation, you can see the crowd is starting to grow here in Hawthorne behind the Mission Control Center here. Looks like folks are trying to get a good view as we anticipate splashdown here in a little less than 15 minutes.
Yeah, we do get pretty excited when we are bringing crew back home. It is pretty exciting to watch them as they touch back down on planet Earth. They've been out in space for about 6 months now. Again, we are currently in the comms blackout period. This is nominal, lasts about 6 minutes. We are just a few minutes away from passing through this blackout period. Now, at this point, we are entering a communications blackout period, which lasts approximately 6 minutes due to plasma formation around the spacecraft. Now, during this time, no vehicle telemetry is received by mission control or the recovery team, and no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible. Now, as a reminder, Dragon is designed to fly itself, so during re-entry, the vehicle will be slowing down from orbital velocity, which is approximately 17,500 miles per hour. Now, the top temperature Dragon will experience upon re-entry is about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, the blackout period is expected to last about 6, maybe up to 7 minutes long.
And we are just about 4 minutes remaining in this anticipated communications blackout period. And during this reentry phase, the crew is going to be experiencing a deceleration, and the team here on the ground is going to continue to monitor that, make sure that everything is proceeding as expected. But once we're on the other side of this communications blackout, that's when we'll begin to see the parachutes deploy, beginning with the drogue parachutes and then following with the main parachutes, and then we'll see splashdown and then the recovery process to get the crew onto the recovery vessel, and then out of the capsule will begin.
And we did mention the high temperatures that the vehicle is seeing during this blackout period. So there is nitrox flowing through the suits that the astronauts are in, and that helps keep them cool while the vehicle is getting very hot on the outside.
So we are getting our very first views there from the WB-57 of the capsule as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. Those views coming from an infrared camera that is on board. So the team will continue to track Dragon as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. We now have about 3 minutes remaining in the blackout period, but again, the WB-57 that is deployed is getting those views of Dragon already.
Once the expected blackout period is over, the core here in Mission Control will attempt to establish communications with the crew. So you may hear some call-outs checking in with the crew. And they will make that call out until the crew does respond, which will confirm acquisition of signal.
We have about 2 minutes remaining in the anticipated period of communications blackout. Now, it's not an exact science. There might be some variation that occurs. We might hear from the crew a little earlier than we expected, or potentially a little bit later. But we are all on the edge of our seats, eagerly awaiting to hear from the crew. So far, everything looking good.
Dragon, SpaceX comm check.
Continuing to get those views from the WB-57 of Crew Dragon as it continues to make its way closer and closer to splashdown.
Freedom, SpaceX comm check.
And SpaceX, Freedom Heavy loud and clear, coming through 30 kilometers altitude.
Copy and concur. Expect automated chute deployment.
Freedom copies. We'll be monitoring.
And HEPSs converge. Expect nominal chute deployment altitude.
Freedom copies. Looking for nominal chute deploy.
Well, Jesse, it is absolutely phenomenal to hear from the crew on the other side of that communications blackout period. We are continuing to get these great views from the WB-57 high altitude aircraft, providing that thermal imagery. We did even see the tail of entry of the vehicle, and it's just absolutely beautiful to see that. So we also heard We did hear a call up to the crew that they are expecting the automated drogue deployment, so we're just standing by for confirmation that Dragon's chutes have deployed.
Again, there will be a set.
Freedom SpaceX, brace for drogue window.
Bracing for drogues.
Core here communicating with the crew, giving them a heads up that they should feel the drogue chute deploying here shortly, followed by the main chutes just about a minute later. The drogue chutes do help to slow the vehicle down to about 350 miles per hour, whereas the main chutes will deploy. After the main chutes deploy, it will slow the vehicle down even more, and by the time that the vehicle splashes down, should be around 16 miles per hour. And there's those drogue chutes, and you can hear the crowd here very excited to see them deploy.
Drogue chute descent rate nominal and visual on 2 healthy drogues.
Freedom copies.
Very cool view of Dragon with the 2 drogue chutes. We are just anticipating the main chutes to deploy here shortly.
Chute descent rate nominal, visual on 4 healthy mains.
And great news, as you can see there, the main chutes have deployed, slowing the Dragon vehicle down significantly, down to approximately 119 miles per hour.
Freedom is 1,000 meters.
Copy 1,000.
Dragon has saved all propulsion systems and is now terminating the nitrox suit and cabin purges, and is beginning to increase.
Freedom's at 800 meters.
Copy 800.
Dragon is beginning to increase pressure in preparation for landing. And the mission control team here in Hawthorne is reporting the precise landing coordinates to the recovery team.
So we did get that confirmation on the main chutes.
600.
The crew is now 600 meters away from splashing down. We do expect splashdown in about 2 minutes from now.
Landing in water is simpler, therefore more reliable, and it provides more margin against unlikely parachute.
Freedom 400 meters.
Copy 4.
provides more margin against unlikely parachute issues. We had to learn how to make Dragon waterproof, but once you do, it is a rinse, review, and reuse type of process. And we are just about a minute away from splashdown of the Dragon vehicle back onto planet Earth. And hearing good callouts of the altitude of Dragon.
Freedom's at 200 meters. We're bracing for splashdown.
Copy, brace for splashdown.
And again, that descent rate is as expected here. Pretty soon we should be able to see the view of the ocean come into view as Crew Dragon Freedom with 4 astronauts on board prepares to splash down after spending 170 days in space after launching on April 27th.
Incredible view as the crowd goes wild for Crew 4.
Copy, Freedom, SpaceX to splashdown and mains cut.
Welcome
Copy, mains are
home.
cut.
Welcome home, Crew 4. Great view watching Dragon splash down back on planet Earth. Now, as you can see on your screen, we have visual confirmation for splashdown of the Dragon spacecraft. Dragon Freedom has returned home, and NASA astronauts Chell, Bob, Jessica, and ESA.
Freedom, we are water uprighting and Stable 1.
Copy, Freedom. We see Stable 1. You are go for 4.800. And on behalf of SpaceX, welcome home. Thanks for flying SpaceX.
And SpaceX from Freedom, thank you for an incredible ride up to orbit and an incredible ride home. Glad to be back.
As you can see, Dragon Freedom has returned home, and NASA astronauts Chell, Bob, and Jessica and ESA astronaut Samantha are back on Earth after an approximately 5-hour return journey from space. The SpaceX recovery ship and team has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they will now make their way to the splashdown location.
And we did hear the call out that the vehicle is in Stable 1. That's the configuration that we're hoping for. Stable 1 means it's in the ocean upright as expected, and you can see that exactly on your screen here. So the teams have been ready and waiting about 3 nautical miles away. So it's going to take them about 30 minutes or so to make their way to Chell, Bob, Jessica, and Samantha inside. But about a minute and 30 seconds after the landing, Mission Control Hawthorne will give the go for final approach and the safe approach. And then about 2 minutes after landing, the approach boat will begin those inspections that we discussed earlier. That's just to ensure that everything is as expected with the vehicle.
X-Dragon, complete with waiting for...
SpaceX copies Dragon for awareness. comm is a little bit choppy, but we copy that you are complete with 4.800 and awaiting recovery personnel. I will provide an update on recovery forces in a couple minutes. How copy?
Standing by.
And Mission Control here in Hawthorne did give the go for that approach and recovery. And so here shortly, we should be able to get some views of the fast boats as they approach the Dragon Freedom with the crew still on board.
Freedom, SpaceX is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside within the next couple minutes.